Welcome everybody. I'm Lauren Adler, the Chief Chocophile of Chocolopolis, and we're here today with Rob and Amy Anderson from Fresco Chocolate. Hello. I feel very fortunate living in Seattle because Rob and Amy are just a couple hours or about an hour and a half north of here. And so, when I opened Chocolopolis in 2008, they started making chocolate. Around that time, I think shortly thereafter. And it's been such a pleasure to be nearby them, to follow in their journey and continue to taste their chocolate. And there were many times, and quite a few of you who are here today joined us in past times when we would get together at the store and Rob would bring samples, and we'd try all these different treatments of different beans. And that's how Rob would come up with his new treatments. And I think many of you joined us last, I think it was January, when we did it for the Nicaragua bars we're going to be trying today. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob in a minute, but I just wanted to ask Rob and Amy to talk a little bit about how do you go about finding a new origin? There are lots of different origins available. So when you're looking at origins, what are you looking for? Just to even start testing something, knowing that you may or may not work with that origin, but what interests you enough to make you want to start testing with something?
Sure. To answer that question, let me go back in time a bit to when I got my first bag of cocoa beans, when I first thought, hey, I want to try this chocolate thing out. It was 2003. And I had found someone who would sell me just a single bag of cocoa beans, which was hard to get at the time. And I got a bag of Venezuelan Carronero Superior beans, and I made some chocolate with them, and I just fell in love with it. At that time, early on, it was hard to find people who would sell beans. Fast forward to 2015, 2017, more and more bean sourcers, farmers, co-ops, people exporting beans started popping up because they saw this explosion of craft chocolate and knew that there was something about it. And so today I probably get 5 emails, 10 emails a week, maybe, from someone. It's usually someone in some origin. Hi, I'm so-and-so from Ecuador. We have a farm. We'd like you to use our beans. And it's really overwhelming. You couldn't possibly try everyone's beans who are trying to source beans to you. And so I end up forming partnerships and relationships with importers who I trust, who I know are in country working with farmers, and all of the important things are covered, like no child labor and equitable sourcing of beans, and the farmers are paid properly. And there's a number of companies I work with that have those attributes, and they will often bring new beans in and ask if I want to try them. And I don't know, I've probably got 20 bags of beans, sample beans, usually between 1 and 2 kilos, a little brown paper bag, like a little lunch bag, that they'll send and say, here, try these, see what you think. So I'm way behind in finding trying new different origins of stuff that people have sent me. But so to answer that's sort of how the whole thing starts, is first a relationship with someone you trust, someone that someone is in country and has a presence in country at least, and that what's happening down there is what you want to be involved with or associated with. Then when you try the beans, there are so many good beans now, so many good sources of cacao, that I look for something that stands out, something that's a little bit special. If I just want something with a subtle fruity note and a little bit of a chocolatey note, pretty much most of the beans I try have something like that. So if I've got 3 or 4 beans from different origins that have kind of the same profile, I'm not going to bring those in and use them usually, because they're kind of the same as something I already have. So I look for something that's a little bit different, maybe unique, something a little special. And every once in a while, something like that pops up. About, I'd say, once or twice a year, something like that pops up. And when we get into the 3 tastings here, there's kind of 3 different stories with these 3 beans. I'll start out with that, and then we can jump into the tasting. The first one we'll taste is the Venezuelan Chihuahua. That one is a classic. That was one of my first beans that I used as a reference flavor, that I thought to myself, wow, I really want to be able to make chocolate like this. and I had tried all the Chihuahuas I could find early on when I was looking. The reference standard I used was at Amadei Chuao, Italian company Amadei, around 2005, 2008, somewhere back then. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And so I tried to find those beans, and I was able to get them early in 2012, 13, and then they went away for a while. And now I've been able to find them again. I'll talk a little more about how that happened when we get into the tasting. So that's one. That's just an old favorite that I try to get whenever possible. Madagascar, which we'll taste second. There's a fella who many of you have heard of if you've been in the chocolate industry. His name is Bertel Akison. And Bertel owns plantations in Madagascar and now in Brazil. But the Madagascar plantations have been in his family for a couple of generations, and he produces some incredible cacao from those plantations, and we'll get into that a little bit as well. I've used that since 2012, the Akison Madagascar, consistently. So I'll continue to buy that. It's just a staple in my chocolate world. The third is more recent. The Opayo Profundo Nicaragua is from a company called Ingerman. And it's a company that I started to talk to about 5 or 6 years ago, and tasted it. They've got a lot of things going on, and we'll get into kind of what they're doing here in a bit when we actually taste the beans. But after a few years, I found one of their varieties that I really enjoyed, which is the one you're tasting, and so I brought them in. And there's a little bit of a sad part of that too, which we'll talk about shortly as well. It has to do with the state of the global transportation industry, and the sourcing of beans is quite challenging at the moment. So more on that later. But that's probably a very long answer to your short question, Lauren. So
excellent. I loved it. It was wonderful. So without further ado, Rob, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, so have your Chuao ready to go. And in fact, what we'll do, go ahead and open it up. Some of you, if you're not familiar with our bars, we have a little seal on the back. You have to put your finger behind it and sort of break it open if you haven't done that already. I suspect most of you have already broken into them, so that's not an issue. And go ahead and taste that. I'm not going to talk about how to taste or the sample size or cleansing your palate or anything like that. There are other classes that Lauren and myself offer when we talk about how to taste. So I won't go into that, but go ahead and do that. And while you're tasting the Chuao, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about Chuao and where these beans come from and what they're about. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and you can taste and I'll chat a bit, and then we'll go from there. Okay, just a nod. Can everyone see my screen? Thumbs up or nod? Okay, perfect. All right. As I mentioned, we're going to start with Chuao, go to Madagascar, and then the Opayo Profundo Nicaragua will be last. Okay, so this is kind of a Chuao 101 for those who may not be as familiar with the bean. Chuao is a small village on the northern coastal mountains of Venezuela. You can see it there on the Google map. That's where it's located. Few people in the chocolate industry have actually been to Chuao. It's kind of hard to get to. It's a remote village. You fly into Caracas and you take a road, then you take a boat, then you spend some time in a fairly remote area. But anyway, that's where it's located right there. You can see it on the map. So a little bit about Chuao, a little background in case you're not familiar with it. The village of Chuao, or the town, was founded in 1660. It's been there for quite a while. It's famous for its cacao plantations. It is surrounded by mountains and dense rainforest to the south and the Caribbean to the north. So it is very remote, and it's only, even today, is only accessible by boat. So the beans that come in and out of the village, or beans that come out of the village, are literally carried on small boats. The beans themselves are harvested and fermented by a small member-owned cooperative. It's called the Chuao Campesina Chuao process. The Empresa Campesina Chuao is the group, the local co-op. They're all farmers who are born in the region. You actually have to be born there to be a member of the cooperative and have some stake in the local farming trade. The cacao is harvested by many different farms, and then it's dried using a process that's been in place for over 400 years. And this is a very famous picture. If you're familiar with Chuao, you've probably seen this kind of a photo. They have like most small villages of the time, there's a church, which is a central gathering place for the village, and a courtyard in the church where the beans are all brought and dried. And they do this even to this day. The beans are brought here and they are dried and prepared for packing. On just a relative scale, in 2021, the Chuao cooperative produced about 21 metric tons of beans. That sounds like a lot, but it's very, very small in the scheme of chocolate production. Myself as a very, very small chocolate maker, I'll buy maybe a half a ton of those beans. So I'm getting a percentage of them, but there's not a lot of them to go around. So I'm very fortunate to have gotten some of those beans this year. Okay, next slide. So here's for you kind of geography geeks. Again, here's a little bit of an overview. You can see on this overview satellite map the Chuao village marked. The actual farms start near the coast down at the bottom. You can see the green area. The farms go from near the coast up through the village, and then about 3 kilometers into the mountains past the village. All the beans that are harvested and dried in the village, are packaged up or bagged up and transported, transported through some small docks, and then transported using small boats. They're little 27-foot boats. Each boat will carry about 1.2 tons of beans in jute sacks. So this is really small scale type of production. Once the beans reach the coast and they're loaded on the boats, they go 20 minutes by sea to another port nearby called Chirona. Then by truck about 3 hours to a warehouse in Valencia, which is a nearby town, to the Chuao Trading Company. Chuao Trading Company is another organization that is involved with Chuao. The beans themselves are distributed worldwide from that Chuao Trading Company. For the US and Canada, they are distributed using a company is the exclusive distributor called Casa Franceschi. And Casa Franceschi is a Venezuelan-based family. They have plantations of their own in Venezuela, and they also manage all of the export to the US and Canada. Other companies manage the export of Chuao beans to Europe and Asia and other parts of the world. But for the beans that I receive here in North America, those come from Casa Franceschi. That was the end of the Chuao overview. So let's talk a little bit about what you're tasting. Lauren, I'm actually going to turn it back over to you, Lauren, for the actual sort of comments and back and forth. So we sort of maintain a bit of organization. So go ahead.
That sounds good. Yeah, so don't be shy, everybody. Turn your mic on or put something in chat. I know we have a lot of people who taste a lot of chocolate and maybe some new people as well. And I know you all have opinions. So there's no right or wrong answers in tasting. It's all personal. So feel free.
Hi, guys. This is Valentina and Ryan.
Hey,
we're off because we have a messy playroom with 2 little guys just running around. So, well, first of all, Rob, I'm from Venezuela, so I want to thank you guys for taking such a beautiful approach to actually taking the time to explain people where Chuao is and how things work in there. I really appreciate that. That was very touching to see that you guys really care about the places where you're sourcing. So thanks so much for that. And my comment about the chocolate is I was so impressed on how subtle at the beginning when we just put it in our mouths. I'm guessing it's a subtle crunching. Subtle, no, sorry. The subtle, yeah, the subtle crunching that you guys are referring to in the packaging. I'm loving the aftertaste. This is one of the best aftertasting chocolates I've ever had. So I really appreciate it. I've eaten my fair share of Chuao, obviously. And I'm just loving the aftertaste. It's very long lasting, at least for me, has been very long lasting.
Mhm.
And then we have another comment. We love the packaging and it looks like so much. You're such an engineer. It's very very appreciated because this is really a good resource. I do conduct tastings and it's very nice to have packaging like this because it's actually you're doing your homework a little bit for us too. So well, those are our comments. So thanks again for taking the time to explain how the things work in Chuao and for sourcing for my country. That's really always very appreciated.
Thank you. I'm glad the engineering approach was appreciated.
Rob, Alice is asking if you can talk about the blended roast that you did for this one.
Those of you who know Fresco and what we've been doing, Valencia mentioned my engineering approach, and I am an engineer by background and education. And so I tend to sort of overanalyze things sometimes. What I do with chocolate, though, is I love to roast at different levels and see what different flavors come out of the chocolate. And we'll see that when we get to the Opio, Nicaragua. There's a light, medium, and dark roast. So there you have it. With the Chihuahua, I did try several different roast profiles before figuring out what I wanted to do with it. And there was some characteristics of all light roast, medium roast, and a darker roast that I really enjoyed. And I wanted to try to bring out a little bit of all of them. So rather than, and Chuao to me is so special, I didn't want to just throw out a light, medium, and dark roast of Chuao. I wanted to somehow try to get the absolute best flavor that I personally could out of it, that I enjoyed. And so I did do some blending of different roast levels. What I do is I make the chocolate at different roast levels, and then I started blending different percentages until the flavor source. So I got a little bit of the sharper notes of the light roast and a little bit of the subtlety of maybe a nuttiness out of a darker roast. And I tried to blend them together to get just the flavor that I was looking for out of it. So that's the blended roast. I don't do that. I haven't done that with any other bars except Chuao. So that's the story there.
But the blended roast is also different than the blend that you guys all tasted in January.
Oh yes.
It's not the same blended, like when you had, if you still have some of your little samples, if you go back and taste that light, medium, and dark, Alice is like, nope, I don't have any of those. If you go back and taste those, it's very different than the actual bar.
Yeah, it's different percentages of different roast levels. For those of you who were on, Lauren mentioned it in the beginning, we had this earlier tasting where we gave you some samples of Chuao and light, medium, and dark roast and a few blended ones. So this ended up being not any of those, but a little separate percentage of different roast levels.
Hey, Rob, I sometimes quote you. I think you once said to me about Chuao that, you said sometimes normally when you get cocoa beans, if you roast them longer, it just tastes like you roasted them longer. But with Chuao, every time you roast them, it changes because of the genetic diversity. Maybe you could comment on that if I'm quoting you accurately.
I'm trying to remember exactly what I told you, but I think the gist of it is that, yeah, to me, Chuao had a very unique characteristic to it in that completely different flavors started to emerge when I did a little bit of a darker roast, and I really enjoyed those flavors. And so again, that's sort of why the blended roast made sense to me here, was just trying to bring out some of those things that were absolutely unique to to a darker roast. In many, there are many beans, as Lauren said, that I'll do a darker roast, and it just changes. It just starts tasting less fruity and more nutty. It's a little bit different with Chuao. You actually get completely new flavors that sort of pop out that you don't get with a lighter roast. The other thing I'll mention on Chuao is the subtle conch. Conching is not as familiar to most people as roasting is, even if you're a chocolate connoisseur. A lot of folks don't put their conch levels on there because conching is kind of it's very equipment dependent, and it's very subjective to the chocolate maker's palate. Conching in this case is heating up the chocolate and mixing it and aerating it to get the final flavor out of the chocolate. Chuao is beautiful on its own. It really doesn't need any extra processing. So you get the roast right, you refine it and get the particle size down so it's a smooth mouthfeel, and then any extra processing I think takes away from it. So I do just a very minimal amount of conching just to kind of level it out a little bit, get all three roasts to blend together properly, and then I leave it alone.
So I'm just going to read some of the comments. We've got Cheryl says, I taste notes of cedar, wood, and tobacco. What a great chocolate. Carolyn Boatsman, very fruity, so pleasant, but not overly acid. Best Chuao I've ever tasted.
Well, thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
And Cheryl.
We'll send you that discount coupon later.
Okay, I was just going to say, I think those are all the comments we have, unless anybody else has any more comments. I think we can move on to Madagascar, but let me just give everybody a second to comment.
Yeah, Corinne has something to say.
So yeah, I really enjoyed this bar. I've been enjoying, as a matter of fact, the last 3 days, I ended a Ghana week using or tasting your bars, the 100% and then the 268%. What I was, and I liked all of them. The texture on your bars are great too, by the way, just consistently, really nice, texture. The aromas seem really subtle for all of them, though, even across, like, that I remember remarking on that about the Ghana ones as well. Is that, and then you're kind of sucked into, the layers of things, that are great. But is there a reason why that, I mean, it may just be these 5 bars, sort of in succession, but why the aromas are a little bit more subtle? Is it the wrapping? You don't seal it 100% in a pouch. I was just curious about whether you had any thoughts about that.
I have some thoughts, but I haven't sort of proven them out yet. I mean, there's so many experiments that I'd like to do. I just haven't had time to do them. So here's my theory about the aroma. We stone grind our chocolate. Some people stone grind, some people use ball mill, some people use roller mill, some universal. We stone grind. You can get very different results depending on how you grind and refine your chocolate. In fact, I did an experiment a few weeks ago. I'll tell you about later if there's time. But we stone ground this. We stone ground this chocolate, and what happens when you stone grind chocolate is it takes longer because it's an older process. It's less efficient than, say, a ball mill. It takes 2 to 3 days in a stone grinder, in a roller, stone grinding roller melange, to get the chocolate to a consistency that you like. Through that whole process, the aroma is changing as it's outgassing and as the cocoa is crushing. It's under the stones. It's outgassing. You get different aromas. You can literally go into our grinding room, and an hour in, it has a particular scent. 4 hours in, that's changed. 24 hours later, it's completely changed. I'm grinding some 100% Madagascar today. And we went in last night and checked it, and it had a particular aroma. It's going to change when we go back in today to check it. It's just the nature of the processing. I think that one possible downside to stone grinding is it takes so long that a lot of the aroma it has outgassed, and it's not as pungent as, say, a ball mill, which takes much less time, and so some of those volatiles haven't had a chance to escape, and so they're still trapped in the chocolate. So when it melts in your fingers, it's going to be a little bit more aromatic. I don't know if that's not scientifically proven or tested. It's just from some experiences recently that I think that that's the case. I believe that's probably one reason why it's not as aromatic as maybe other bars. But we could probably talk for hours on that, and we don't have time for that. But that's what I'm thinking, Kareem, is why it's a little less aromatic. Hi, Carolyn.
Oh, yeah, I'd just like to say that it's so clever the way you have blended the 3 roasts together. I don't know that I've ever heard about that being done before. Maybe I have tasted chocolate where that was done, but I'm not surprised that I'm hearing it first from you with your bent for engineering and in the pursuit of the most wonderful flavor. It's really great.
Thank you so much. I know I've in the chocolate world, a lot of us just chat with each other. And I know of other chocolate makers who do blend roasts. They don't necessarily advertise the fact. That's kind of one of my little niches, is I just love talking about roasting and conching. And so I'll talk about it. Other chocolate makers focus on other things, but I do know others too who have blend roasts as well. So I don't think it's unique to me. It's just unique that I chat about it so much.
Well, it really turned out beautiful in this case.
Thank you so much.
All right, I
Hey,
think in
Larissa.
the interest of time, we
Just-
should probably head off to Madagascar.
Let's let Larissa.
Oh,
have
sorry,
one
Larissa,
quick
go
comment.
ahead.
Oh, it was just a quick comment because Chuao is my absolute favorite, and I was introduced to it by Bonat chocolates
Mhm.
out of France, and I think it's lovely. And this, to me, is right up there with it. Is in terms of is one of the best I've had. But what I loved about it is a lot of times when you get the bright fruitiness, it hits you too soon and kind of overwhelms. And I like how yours finishes with that. The front is very smooth. I'm getting kind of like a nutty, but like a cashew, really light and subtle. But I love how you bring it out at the end. And as somebody mentioned, without all the acidity, it's just beautiful. So that was just my comment.
Thank you. And actually, we were going for that. I had sent these samples to some of you may know of a chocolate taster author, a French lady named Chloe. I sent her all of my Chuao samples and asked her to comment on them, and she loved the sour acidity of the light roast. I kind of disagreed with her on it. I didn't like it as much right up front, so I tried to mute that a bit by blending it. And so, thank you. That's kind of what I was going for.
I think the interesting thing for me is when I don't associate Chuao necessarily with the acidic, the bright fruit notes, I associate it more with nutty and spicy. And so this one has kind of a bit of everything, which is interesting. All right, so any other comments before we head off to Madagascar? Wonderful. Go ahead, Rob.
Thank you. Okay, so get your Madagascar bar out and open it up if you haven't already, and let's do some tasting. And while you're sampling that, again, I will share my screen and talk a bit about Madagascar. All right, if you've been around chocolate for a while, you're familiar with Madagascar, and you've probably heard the name Bertel Akesson. He's one of the largest providers of Madagascar cacao today. There are others, but he is by far the largest for craft chocolate makers. Simply because of his sustainable practices. It's all organic. It's everything. The workers are fairly compensated. It's everything that a craft chocolate maker looks for in a high quality bean. This is an actual picture from his plantation of their drying beds. They're doing some. They're actually out there in the midst of the beans, raking them around, drying them in the sun. The official name of his industry in Madagascar is called Akesson's Organic Plantation. It's actually 5 small farms that are all lumped under one umbrella called the Bijovo, I think is the pronunciation, Bijovo Estate. It's about 5,400 acres. And then each of the small farms are several hundred to a couple thousand acres each. As a chocolate maker, I can buy beans from those specific farms. They can be different if you specify different fermentations. He will customize beans for folks. It's all very, very craft-like, even though he's a larger producer of cacao than some. All right, here's a picture of his fermentation boxes. So when the cacao harvested, they go into these wooden boxes. They're turned. The beans are turned a couple of times a day to get them to ferment and to get the juices to go from sugars to alcohols to be able to start changing the flavor of the beans. And these particular beans that you're tasting are fermented for 5 days. He has some that are fermented more, some less. These are a 5-day fermentation. And then there's a photo of Bertel. If you've been around the Northwest Chocolate Festival or any of the chocolate events, you may have seen him. He often will be there and walk around and chat with folks. He's very personable, really nice fellow. And that's he and I together at a Northwest Chocolate Festival a few years ago, where one of my Madagascar bars won a little award at the event. So that was fun. And I think that was pretty much it. All right.
Okay, I still have chocolate in my mouth, but
That's fine. No rush.
Like I do too.
No rush.
life doesn't get any better. Yes, so feel free to put your comments in chat. I feel like I'm getting some strawberry notes, which normally for Madagascar, it's always the red fruit, and I usually get like really strong raspberries. Sometimes it's sour cherry, depending on the harvest. But for me today, it's strawberries. And it could be my palate. I'm finding my palate today is a little off. So it might be me.
Well, this is Cheryl, and I'm getting some citrus and some raspberry, and also a nice little bit of astringency at the end. So kind of a coffee sort of astringency at the very end. It was great, though. I loved it.
Good. Thank you, Cheryl.
I was going to say, I usually don't like Madagascar because I find it very sour, very acidic. And this is not. It's like you've tapped it off at the right level where you get the brightness, but it doesn't overwhelm the chocolate. Usually I can't taste the chocolate. I just get like too much sour, too much acid. This is gorgeous.
Thank
Very
you.
nice of them.
Thank you. Now you would not like our light roast Madagascar then. It's this is a medium roast, which we haven't done in several years. We used to do a medium and a dark roast Madagascar along with our light. Our light we've done since the beginning. That one is a 74%, a little less sugar, but it's very light. And folks usually say it tastes like pink grapefruit or lemon zest. I mean, it's got that super Madagascar tang to it. But this is a little more subtle in my opinion.
Some of the comments we're getting is Alice says, agree, and some cherry. I think she was agreeing with the raspberry comment. Ryan and Valentina say they're actually getting also a bit of strawberry jam. I think that is a good description. I think it is definitely more strawberry jam than just strawberries. Alice likes the acidity balance. And Ruth says it was like a bright fruit bomb. I'm getting raspberry jam for sure. I'm curious, Rob, if you can talk about when these bars were made and how you think about, how you don't know how the flavor is going to change over time unless you've already tested it, I'm guessing, but how do you think about flavors changing over time as the chocolate sits for a while?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. You really, as Lauren said, you really never know what the chocolate's going to taste like until at least a month after it's made. You have to kind of take a best guess when you're roasting and then conching. When it comes right out of the machinery and you mold it into bars and temper it and you taste it for the first time, it's usually a little more harsh, a little more bright than it's going to end up being. The chocolate flavor settles down over the first several weeks and changes fairly substantial. Then over a month, maybe 6 weeks or so, it's probably settled into the flavor that it's going to be for some time after that. And so when did I don't remember when we made these particular ones. August?
No, July.
July, yeah. So these were manufactured in July. And they did sit, we didn't have our packaging ready yet. So they sat wrapped in the gold foil, but with no box or no wrapper for several weeks. I don't remember how long. Anyway, they did have a chance to settle down, and we got to taste them before we packaged them up and actually sold them to anyone. And so I was quite pleased with it. In fact, you're probably among the first to taste this one. This is fairly new for us. We did a little trade show, our first live event last weekend in Salt Lake City, and we brought them there. They were quite popular. And I don't remember, I think we had one other tasting. Yes, one other tasting with a group called the Manhattan Chocolate Society, some folks in New York, and they tasted it. And other than that, you're the first. So it's not on anyone's retail shelf yet, I don't think.
Nope. Nope,
Okay,
it's not.
so it's brand new.
I don't think it's even on the website yet.
I don't remember.
Mm-mm.
Anyway, it's new. So you're tasting the first batch that's been aged enough to kind of see where the flavor is going to sit.
And the
So
Chuao too.
on the Chuao too, yeah. So I appreciate all these comments. It helps us to see if we've done it right or if we need to go back to the drawing board.
So Carolyn says, a fudgier Madagascar than I've tasted before from you. Still keeping the citrus red fruit, agree with the pink grapefruit. Why does it seem quite different from your previous? Of course, I might be mistaken about that.
It's very different because of the roast. The other one is a light roast. It's 74%, so a little less sugar, but the less sugar is really offset by the brightness of the light roast that has that lemon zesty, pink grapefruit, whatever in there that's very, 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 some sour notes to it. So the roast mellows some of that out and brings out, personally, I get a bit of a raspberry in the background. Kind of, you know how a raspberry is tart but sweet. I get that when I taste this, but that's just my palate.
Okay, any other comments, Larissa? Go ahead.
Just a quick one based on what you said about the flavor taking about that month or so to come through. Then how long does it take you to develop new flavor profiles with all the different roast blends and the conching? Are you just sort of doing those things all at once and then waiting a month and then retrying it again until, so when you get your beans to when you land on the right blend and that you want to do of roasting and conching, how long does it take before then there's actual chocolate made for commercial use?
So let's see, the Chuao beans, as an example, I got last October of 2020. So it's been about a year. I made a bunch of batches of light, medium, dark roast and a few different conch levels. I made maybe
16
maybe, batches,
yeah.
I think, small micro batches, a few pounds each.
Like you'd pull it out as it was conching and things like that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
very small batches, hand tempered them and molded them into little sample beans. That's kind of what I do with all new chocolate. And then I'll taste it right away just to see if I'm on track. You can tell right away if you've really got it wrong, and then you can throw out that version.
Well, he likes to eat the nibs and I don't. And so he can even taste them as he's roasting them. He'll crack it open and eat the beans and go, yeah, okay. And so he'll pull out a couple beans and just let them, he marks them, the engineer. And
A bean matrix.
yeah, he really does have like a little bean matrix. He'll have like 6 or 8 bowls lined up. And as he's taking them out, and we'll say, this has been in for, 5 minutes. This was 8 minutes. This was 10. He would just have that all the way up there. And here's the burnt one. So he knows where it started out raw all the way up to burnt.
So that's for the roasting. And then similarly with conching, I will purposely take any batch of chocolate, like when I did the Madagascar, same with the Chuao. I will over conch it until it tastes flat and like a Hershey special dark bar at the end. And it's just nothing. And so I'll take samples throughout the whole process and then taste them right then, and then save them and taste them later after they've settled down a bit, just to see what's happened to the flavors. And so it does take quite a while, months, usually a few months, because you've got to, once you settle in on, ooh, this roast is nice, and this roast is nice, and this roast is nice, you make some chocolate out of those roasts, you pull out different conch levels, you taste them right away. Maybe you throw a few of those away then because they're just bad, or you've over conched it and yeah, that one's no good, or you haven't conched it at all and it's just just horrible, vinegary, raw, horrible, yucky. There's, some beans really need to be conched to get this vinegary taste out of them. Some do, some don't. And so then you end up with, maybe 6, 8 samples, 10 samples of chocolate. You're going to wait, let it age and taste later. And then eventually, like with the Chuao, I ended up blending those into a blended roast. With the Madagascar, I ended up with just the medium roast that I wanted. I tried a dark roast. I didn't like what it was doing to the flavor of the Madagascar. It just sort of muted all the nice things out of Madagascar, and I wasn't happy with it. So I ended up with a medium roast instead of a dark one. And so it'll take a couple of months, best case, to try to sort it all out.
I'm trying to remember, have you ever done a dark roast Madagascar?
Yeah, it was recipe 216. I had 214, which is my light roast, 215, my medium roast, 216, my dark roast. And we made it for a short time, and it was flat and not as interesting as anyone liked. So it went away.
Okay, so any other comments or questions about this bar? Shall we move on to the next 3?
Yes, let's do. So this is where it gets, I don't want to say fun, it's all been fun, more complex, because we have 3 roasts of the same origin. So get your Opayo, Profundo, Nicaragua bars handy. We're going to start with the light roast. We're going to go light, medium, and dark. So start with the light roast, recipe 270 as it's labeled. And I'm not going to stop and comment on each one of them. I'm just going to let you taste all 3 at your own pace. So just open them up, taste them at your own pace, and then we'll talk about all 3 at the end. And while you're doing that, I have a few slides that we will share. As I mentioned, we'll do the light first, then the medium, then the dark. These are all 70% bars. And in this case, 70% with about 10% added cocoa butter. So the 70% is the cacao and the cocoa butter, and then 30% is the cane sugar. And oh, by the way, these 3 bars, we don't have any stickers on them yet. They just won silver,
That's what I was just looking
silver
at.
and 1
Silver
bronze,
and
I
bronze.
can't, at the Academy of Chocolate in London. So happy about that.
Double check and see which one's which one.
Okay, so I get these beans from a company called Engelmann Fine Cocoa. Engelmann is a company that focuses on beans from Nicaragua. I was first introduced to them met them at a Northwest Chocolate Festival in Seattle, probably around 2015. They had a booth there, and they were just trying to get chocolate makers to try their beans and use their beans. They do something quite interesting that, as my engineering side really kind of was drawn to. They have different profiles of beans, both from different genotypes, from different parts of Nicaragua, but also through different fermentation profiles. So they will take some beans, ferment them for 2 days and turn them frequently, some 3 days and turn them less frequently. And they came up with a number of different fermentation profiles for the same beans that would have different flavor notes. And I really was intrigued by that. I didn't jump on it right away. I was doing other things, I think. But finally, in about 2019, I found a variety of their beans that I really liked and started to use them. So that's what you're tasting now. The name Opayo is it's named after one of the farmers. It's his given name is Opayo, that they in the origin where they're getting the beans. But this particular bean, Opayo, and the Profundo is the fermentation profile on the beans. I think I even explained it on the back of the bar. I may. Let's see. Yes. Profundo describes a long fermentation and slow drying process. So long fermentation for them is about 4 days, and they turn the beans a couple of times a day, and that goes on for about 4 days to get the particular flavor profile. And they have the same Opayo beans with, I think, 2 or 3 different fermentation profiles. So you may taste an Opayo, a chocolate made from Opayo, Nicaraguan beans from Ingerman, from someone else, but if it's not the Profundo fermentation profile, then it's going to have probably a different flavor. It'll of course be a different flavor because it's made by a different chocolate maker, and that always affects the flavor. But the beans themselves may not be the Profundo, which will definitely affect the flavor. So these particular beans are from the Waslala area, which is a natural reserve in northern Nicaragua. I didn't know a lot about Nicaragua before I got these beans. Apparently, Nicaragua is very volcanic. There are a lot of active volcanoes in the country of Nicaragua, and particularly in the northern area where this natural preserve is, where the beans come from. So the soil is very, very volcanic, which affects the flavor quite a bit. So a little bit about the farmers. Ingerman brings together a number of farmers and helps them all out by combining their beans and giving them a decent price for them. And so they're doing a good service in the country. So in the entire Ingerman group of co-op farmers, there's about 1,000 different farmers in various regions of Nicaragua that they work with. About 450 are organic certified. The average farm size is 2 to 3 hectares, so 5 or 6 acres each. And about 5,000 workers and their families are benefited or receive some sort of benefit from working with Ingerman. So it's a good, worthwhile thing that they're doing down there. And here's a couple of photos. One of the farmers harvesting some beans, and then one of the farmers, and I have another slide that I didn't put in with his name on it, and I don't remember his name, but this is Mr. Farmer, because I don't remember his name.
Mr. Farmer.
Okay, let me stop sharing my screen and we can talk a bit.
I'm still working. I'm just on the second barn. I'm spending a lot of time on these. I think for me, Ingerman is interesting because I put a link so people can look at them. They're a Danish company and they get a lot of funding from NGOs, and you know, they do have a social, part of their story is a social mission. And they do seem to be having some kind of an impact, at least according to their website. But they do trademark the names of their cacao, right? So somebody else, I don't know that they, you know, would be farming, or that the cacao they're farming would be going anywhere else. But if it were, it wouldn't be called the same name because they do trademark.
So the medium roast, the 271, won a silver, and the light and the dark one bronze in the recent Academy of Chocolate in London.
Sorry, could you say that again? Which ones?
Yeah, the light and dark received a bronze awards at the Academy of Chocolate, and the medium received a silver.
Congratulations, that's awesome.
Thank you. It's kind of a fun award. I mean, it's always nice to be recognized, but there were, I think they said this year there were just over 1,000 different chocolate entries, and so and they're from around the world, so they're judged against bars from everywhere. It's kind of fun to see all the different entries and the people who are doing different interesting things.
How long have you been entering the AOC awards?
I think 2015.
Yeah, we didn't do it right away.
Yeah, 2015. And with these awards, and then the Madagascar that you tasted also won an award, didn't it?
No, we didn't enter that one.
We didn't enter that one. It's too new.
It was too new.
Anyway, we just little pat on the back, I guess. We just passed our 50th International Chocolate Award from the Academy of Chocolate and the International Chocolate Award. So that makes 50 awards for us so far. So it's been fun.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
I think, as you said, it's nice that it's on an international stage, because I think American craft chocolate makers definitely have, I used to say they had a style. I think it's broad enough now that that's not necessarily the case. Everybody's kind of got their own, but I do think that it is interesting to see what others are doing, and other countries may have certain styles that their consumers prefer. And it is kind of nice when you get them all together. And and have them in a throwdown. I'm kidding.
Smackdown.
Yeah. Alice had asked talk about the cocoa butter, but I'm curious if there's something specific, Alice, that you want to know about the cocoa butter.
I'll tell you about the cocoa butter, and hopefully you'll get your sound working, but if not, maybe I can answer it. So in these bars, there's about 13% added cocoa butter. Just the chocolate, the cacao itself, I think has a little less butter in it naturally than some other beans we've worked with. So I added a couple extra percentage beyond what I normally try to go in the 10% range. I don't want to dilute the flavor of the chocolate. And if you add too much cocoa butter, you dilute the actual cacao flavor. If you don't add enough, or I mean, and it's all subjective, of course, but if you put no cocoa butter in, you get the straight pure cacao flavor, but it can tend to be a little chalky or a little less interesting or a little less smooth on the mouthfeel.
The Papua New Guinea that we had.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
So, so I tend to add about 10%. That's just my personal preference. This had a few extra percentage, 12 or 13, I don't recall. All three bars are the same. And I did that just because the beans themselves have a little less butter in them than other beans I've worked with. And I wanted to get the mouthfeel to be sort of nice and silky.
Can you talk a little bit? I know some chocolate makers are very much, we make 2-ingredient chocolate, only cocoa beans and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it really, as you kind of alluded to, depends on the natural content of the cocoa butter in the bean. Can you talk about a little bit more about that? I know you said you try to add 10%, but how do you think about the natural content in the bean versus what you're going to add?
Sure. So to me, it's always a matter of texture and flavor. Cocoa butter goes in towards the end. And so as the chocolate is grinding, the sugar is added, then I kind of I taste along the way. I get a sense of as I'm developing the recipe, I get a sense of, yeah, this is a little chalky, or this is a little bit less smooth than I'd like, or it's a little bit pasty. And so I'll add a little more or a little less cocoa butter to try to get a mouthfeel that I prefer. And I prefer more of I like something kind of in the middle. I don't personally prefer a 2-ingredient chocolate usually. We did do one. We had a Papua New Guinea bar a few years ago when we could get those beans, and it was a 2-ingredient. It's pain to work with because the chocolate viscosity is really high, and it doesn't flow well if you have a depositor to put it into molds like we do. It's just sort of like peanut butter trying to get it through your machinery, and it's hard to work with. But besides that, it's very strong. It has a right up front flavor that hits you. The cocoa butter tends to take the starting note and sort of delay it slightly. So you end up with first the butter is melting and then the flavor starts to hit you and wrap up, as opposed to some 2-ingredient chocolates, which you put it in your mouth and immediately you'll get a hit of something, whatever the flavor is. So I tend to prefer that myself. And so I'll end up putting in at least 8%, sometimes as high as 15%. If you put too much in, you dilute the chocolate flavor itself and you get maybe a nice flavor, but it's not as strong as you might like. So it's all subjective, of course, but that's just my preference.
Yeah, I was curious if you press your own cocoa butter and try to keep the cocoa butter from the bean that you're using, or if you purchase cocoa butter and just use one cocoa butter across all of your chocolate.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Some chocolate makers are really, I guess, religious about that. They want to keep the cocoa butter and the origin exactly the same, so they press their own. We don't. I may someday decide to do that, but I don't have a press. And so I found I'll end up finding a cocoa butter that I like and stick with it. So the butter you're tasting is an organic natural butter from Peru. And I buy it in 25 kilo or 55-pound blocks. And so I have these blocks of chocolate and a mallet and a chisel, and I break them up and melt them, and then put the melted cocoa butter in the chocolate as it's nearing the end of its processing cycle.
Wanted me to ask my question, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
or go ahead and make your comment, whatever you'd like to
Okay,
do.
well, I just love the way in the light, subtle one, about 15, 20 seconds into it, all of a sudden there's this big explosion of flavor. And to me, it was something decadent, like I would get at the fairgrounds or something. I'm not quite sure what, maybe cotton candy or caramel corn, or it was just really something special. I really like that. I did have a question about the cocoa butter. Does it have a flavor on its own?
Yes, it does. Not much, but it does. So you can buy two kinds of cocoa butter. You can buy a deodorized butter, or you can buy non-deodorized butter. The deodorized butter is kind of sterile. It's like it's kind of gross, but it'd be like putting Crisco in your chocolate. I mean, it's the same thing. It's vegetable fat. Cocoa butter is just vegetable fat. It's just vegetable fat from the cocoa beans. And so the deodorized cocoa butter has a very sterile, blank, nothing to it. I buy non-deodorized. I buy the cocoa butter that has a natural flavor of whatever bean it comes from. And so it takes a little longer to find one. If a source goes away, then it takes a while to find a new one, because I end up tasting a lot of cocoa butters and that's not fun. Tasting chocolate's fun. Tasting cocoa butter is not fun. You're basically tasting like you're tasting, different brands of Crisco. It's just horrible to actually taste on its own. But you have to, just to make sure there's no off notes in there that it's going to affect your chocolate. Hopefully what you put in there either is neutral, or it might slightly enhance the chocolate, but it's the flavor is so subtle compared to the actual cacao that usually it's just kind of a zero adder as far as flavor, usually.
Where did you say you're getting your cocoa butter from?
This is from Peru.
Peru. Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say, for me, the moment when I realized how different deodorized and non-deodorized were was, I realized that most of the white chocolate I had been eating, this was many years ago, is made with deodorized, right? So it's very sweet and confectionery-like. And then one day I had El Rey, which is a Venezuelan chocolate maker's white chocolate, and realized this tastes very different. And it was non-deodorized cocoa butter. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of, like, non-deodorized has like almost a milk chocolatey. It reminds me a little bit of milk chocolate when you're eating white chocolate that's made with it.
Yeah.
So when we used to make our peppermint bark at the store, we actually used the El Rey that was non-deodorized because it added some flavor. But if you ever want to taste the difference, you could try to find some white chocolate that's either El Rey and then something else, because usually the others are going to be deodorized. And then they're really sweet, but they don't really have any flavor of any kind. All right, so let's see. Alice says we prefer the dark, fudgy, robust flavor of the bar. All right, and I think up next was Corinne. I think you had a question. Go ahead and turn on your mic. Yep.
Yeah, hi. More just comments than questions, but I really liked these three bars. I usually taste bars really slowly, so it's hard for me to kind of race through, because one of the magic things to me is that you set it aside, 2 minutes later, it tastes different, or smells different, and you keep doing that and get, these layers of things. So I got a little bit more, almost like an open, like a warm toasted wood or something from the first one, and a little bit of savory bacony in the aroma. Really, really subtle. I liked it a lot. That would be a flaw for some people, but I thought it was so subtle and so wonderful that it really, and really fudgy, creamy texture again. And then the medium roast one, I got like more of a nutty kind of green seed, mild note. And then the last one, I got sort of more of a, last one is an example. The dark roast for me is like, how do you be totally chocolatey, but without being boring at all? And it just was like this amazing, almost like a borderline fruit jam at the end. But so really nice all the way through. My palate's way off.
Uh-oh. Corinne is frozen right in the middle of an interesting comment. Her palate is where she left us hanging. All right, well, we'll wait a minute, see if she comes back, and we'll see. We'll get the cliffhanger when she comes back. Any other questions, comments, or thoughts on this bar or any of the bars? And Rob, I did create a poll for the end so people can check off which their favorites were. And they get
Awesome.
multiple choice. They get many, or not multiple, they get many. So Hang on, Carolyn, 1 second. So Valentina and Ryan say, yes, the first bar was very earthy to us, even a hint of smoke. That said, we prefer the darker roast best. And okay, go ahead, Carolyn.
Oh, Corinne's back. Yay. We lost you for a second, Corinne.
Go ahead, Corinne, I'll wait.
Yeah, I was finished with what I was saying. I
Oh,
don't know.
but you left us hanging. You said my palate is, and then you froze.
Oh,
We're all wondering, what is your palate?
well, yeah, no, I'm on some pretty strong antibiotics for a salivary gland infection. So that tends to, like, I don't trust what I'm tasting, you know, so, but it's not going to stop me from eating chocolate. That's what
Right?
I would this, forget about that. So, but anyway, to whatever credibility I may or may not have today, you know, thank you, because I enjoyed, you know, especially the side-by-side tasting is really, I think, what so many of us really appreciate about what you're doing. So thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Carolyn, well, go ahead.
What kind of cane sugar do you use? Is it the pure white kind or is it the sandy kind that has a little bit of molasses in it?
It's the sandy kind. So it's an organic cane sugar. It comes from Brazil. And so it's kind of got that little bit of a, it looks like that sugar in the raw kind of sugar, you know, it's got a little bit of brown in it. Not like a brown sugar brown, but just a little bit of a tan color to it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Have you found that that affects flavor for you at all, or do you have to do anything? All right, I guess not, because I don't notice it in these, but.
I have found, not in a negative way. I found in the beginning, as I was experimenting with chocolate, I used to use C&H pure cane sugar. It's not made in Hawaii anymore, like the old commercials used to say. It's from the Philippines, but I used to use the generic, you know, white sugar, and I was often finding kind of a metallic flavor lingering in the background with that. I don't know why. Don't ever eat chocolate with beet sugar. Consider yourself warned. So I found that the cane sugar with a little bit of molasses content, just the natural cane sugar that has not been bleached, is the best as far as what I like. And
yeah, I mean, I think I was going to say, for me, I find it challenging. I'm sure me, probably like many of you, you know, I want to eat the most natural foods I can, but when it comes to chocolate, you know, I've tried stuff with maple sugar, coconut sugar, all of those, and they always add flavor to the chocolate. And being a chocolate purist, like I'm sure many of you are, I'm like, I don't want that flavor in my chocolate. And so it really is kind of this struggle between more natural and flavor.
When I do often get folks saying, do you use this sugar? Do you use coconut sugar? Do you use anything more natural than cane sugar? My comment is, hey, I've got a whole line of 100% bars that are completely natural. So that's my answer to natural chocolate. Yeah, Larissa, hi.
I had a question to help me with my ignorance here. So when I tasted the light roast subtle conch, I get a bit of astringency at the end, kind of like that tannin on the tongue, but I don't get it on the other two. So what is it part of the roasting? Is it part of the conching? What addresses the amount of astringency you get?
There are so many things that can affect astringency. There are tannins naturally occurring in the chocolate. The roast can affect it. So a longer roast can remove some of the tannins, not all of them. Conching will affect it to a lesser degree. The conching heat isn't quite enough to get rid of the tannins as much as the roasting is. If a chocolate maker is not careful and with his winnowing process, if he leaves shell in the chocolate, in the nibs, the shell is highly astringent, and you'll get a tannin there too, and a bitterness. So if you taste chocolate that's bitter and tannin, it could be a number of things. It could be bad beans or lower quality beans, but it also could be.
It's not bitter. It's just like when it ends, it's that sort of just on the tongue, kind of like a tannin, like you said. It's not negative, but I'm not getting it in the other two. To me, it's kind of like when you eat like an underripe banana. Do you know that? I don't know if that's tannin or astringency, but that kind of leaves you.
Yeah, dry mouth, tannin.
Yeah, but I only get it on the light one.
Yeah, the roast can affect that. There are certain chemicals that are changed in the roasting process and the browning process, called a Maillard reaction, during that roasting, that are transformed and sugars are changed, and so the tannins end up changing in that process.
Okay. Oh, it's interesting just to see how they vary. Thank you.
Yeah.
So why don't I go ahead and throw up this poll, and you can choose many. And I think these were all great. I mean, it's wonderful work as always, Rob and Amy. You guys do such a great job. And I just think it's fun to see when you have a group of diverse palates, like kind of are there some favorites? So let me go ahead and launch the poll here, and you can choose more than one. So just give us what were the top favorites today.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and I'm gonna
Talk about the supply chain.
oh yeah, while you're
Oh,
voting.
yes.
Yeah, while you're voting, let me mention the supply chain. I don't know if you're involved at all in supply chain logistics, which some of you may have jobs where you are. You'll know that the supply chain, worldwide supply chain, is really messed up. The shipping world is just a mess right now. One example, all of the shipping ports on the West Coast, and there are only 3. There's 2 in LA, in San Pedro and Los Angeles, and 1 in San Francisco, where container ships come in, well, and and Seattle, where container ships come in from usually Pacific Rim areas. Usually their container ships, there's no wait. There's usually maybe 1 container ship out there waiting to come in. I heard a statistic literally yesterday. The port of San Pedro in California had over 75 ships docked with a 3-week delay to get into port. And it's incredible what's happening. It's all kind of COVID related, where literally there aren't enough people to unload the ships. There aren't trucks to take the containers away. There aren't people in the loading docks where the containers need to be unloaded to unload them, to get the empty containers back to the docks, to load them up again. There's so many, it's a domino effect. So what's happened as a result of that is it's harder to get cocoa beans than it has been ever in my history of making chocolate. The Nicaraguan beans that we get, the Opayo Profundo beans, we got 1 shipment last year, and we were supposed to get a shipment again in July. We hope that container ship will land and we'll get the shipment by November. We don't know. And so I've used all my Opayo Nicaragua beans to make these bars. We have bars, but they won't last much longer. And so it's an interesting situation. Getting beans has really been challenging. And those warehouses that have beans, there are more on the East Coast than there are on the West Coast that actually have good stocks of beans. So I've been getting like the Madagascar. The Madagascar came from the West Coast warehouse in the Bay Area, but everything else I get comes from the East Coast. It's a little easier. It's actually easier to get beans shipped across the country than it is to get them shipped from California to Washington right now, because of just the whole supply chain is messed up. We'll see what happens. I'm sure chocolate makers will figure out how to be creative and do different things, but right now it's challenging. It's challenging. So you may end up not being able to get some of the chocolate you like from different chocolate makers just because of that.
I actually was talking to a colleague of ours in the industry who was trying to ship a piece of equipment from Europe to the US, and the quotes he got was $20,000 for a container that would take 3 months to get it here, or $13,000 for air freighting it. So you have like that inverse yield curve with bonds, where the air freight's actually less expensive than the container. And on top of that, he said to me, normally it would cost him $2,500 to $3,000 for that container, and maybe $3,500 to $4,000 for air freight. So I'm curious if you've seen costs go up for what you're purchasing as well, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Shipping.
Freight costs, shipping has gone up substantially. So for example, to get a pallet of beans. So you can fit a half a ton of beans on a single wooden pallet, a 4x4 pallet. And so a half a ton of beans from East Bay Logistics, which is basically San Francisco. From San Francisco to here in Northwest Washington, would have been $300 a year ago. It's now $500 to $550, and delayed. We could get it in 2 days. A year ago, we can probably get it in a week today. So it's not unbearable, but it's certainly affecting, if you need something right away, that's a problem.
All right, so about 10 people have voted in the poll. I'll leave it open just for a minute or so more, just so we can, it's not really voting, we're just collecting opinions, but in case others want to. I know we had a lot of chocolate to taste, as Corinne pointed out. I think it was Corinne. And it is hard to get through it all in a thoughtful way in a short period of time. And I'm curious if anybody else has more questions or anything else they want to talk about today around with Fresco Chocolate and any of these new bars. Oh, Carolyn Boatsman says, thank you, Rob and Amy, you brighten our lives.
No, thank you. Thank you so much.
Did you want to talk about the difference of the constant versus the ball?
Oh, yeah. Lauren, how much time do we have? We got like
we have about 8 minutes, so we've got time.
Let me tell you about a fun little experiment I did just about a month ago. I use, as I mentioned, I use stone melange, ball mill type of a process. I have a local chocolate maker friend here in our town of Bellingham who also makes chocolate. He makes chocolate for supermarkets, so it's a little bit different scale, but we share resources, and I help him, he helps me. It's a good, the industry in the whole is a good industry. A lot of folks help each other, and it's really fun to do that. So I used he has a ball mill. I used his ball mill to make a batch of chocolate with an origin called Llamas. It's an Amazonian Peru bean that I'll be coming out with some bars either later this year or early next year. And so I made batches of chocolate with his ball mill and with my stone melange. And just to give you kind of a comparison, it takes me 3 days in my melange to get the chocolate to the consistency I like. In his ball mill, it takes 90 minutes. It's an amazing difference. However, the chocolate is being smashed by little ball bearings, and so the mechanism or the way that chocolate is being processed is much different. The taste is phenomenally different. I did a blind tasting with some friends at a group called the Manhattan Chocolate Society with just those two chocolates made from both processes to see if they could taste the difference. The only difference in the chocolate was one was made with his machine and one was made with my machine, and there was an astounding difference. Huge difference. Maybe we'll do one of those kind of things here in the future. But just be aware, there's a huge difference in how you make the chocolate. Every step matters. Whether you roast the chocolate slowly or whether you roast it hotter and faster, whether you grind it using machine A versus machine B, whether you conch it using a conch that works one way versus another, you can affect the flavor of the chocolate. And so one other thing, if you taste chocolate and you really, really like it from some manufacturer, you might be interested to talk to them and figure out, well, how do they make their chocolate? What are the things that they use? Because you may go to other chocolate makers and find chocolate that you don't necessarily like, and they may use a different machine or a different mechanism to make their chocolate. And you may find a trend. It may not, don't just judge versus one chocolate maker, but if you find a trend, you may find that you don't necessarily like chocolate that's made using certain types of equipment. It may be interesting to you. You may not care. If you like the chocolate, you like it, and if you don't, you don't. But it may be interesting to you to know how the chocolate's made, what type of equipment it's made with, because it will dramatically affect the final flavor of the chocolate.
So I have a question, and then I'll throw it to Larissa, who also has a question. I'm curious in the two that you were talking about, Rob, where you made the one Peru on your machine, your melanger, and the other on the ball mill. How was the texture difference on those two?
Texture was absolutely identical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is the ball mill smashes the cocoa and the sugar together much more efficiently. And so it's getting the particle size down, and we measured it. We've used a little micrometer and measured his chocolate and measured my chocolate, and they were all 15 to 20 microns. So the actual texture on your tongue, how it feels, wasn't gritty, it wasn't pasty, they were both essentially the same. Took him 90 minutes and took mine 3 days, but it's essentially the same. The flavor, however, was completely different.
Okay. Go ahead, Larissa. You have a question.
Yeah, my first question is a follow-up on yours, Lauren. Is it different good, as in both taste really good, or is it different, one's really good and one's not so good?
So very subjectively, mine was really good and his was awful. Now,
okay. Now my second. Okay, go on.
I say that because in the melange that takes 3 days, the conching part actually starts happening in the melange without adding any extra heat, because the friction of the stones crushing generates its own heat and starts the melanging process. Then you can finish that process with added heat later. In a ball mill, not just his, but any ball mill, it's crushing it so fast that there isn't a chance for that heat to develop and for the chocolate to outgas. So it was essentially like eating completely unconched chocolate, which is sort of vinegary and sour. So I had to conch the chocolate from his machine to get it to taste more like my chocolate.
And then my second question is a roasting question. Do you ever in your roast, like some things, for example, like I bake, right? And you will go and you'll start something exceedingly hot, like 500 degrees. And then 5 minutes in, you drop it to say 350. And you need that heat usually to like give rise or something like that. Do you ever have any things like that in your roasting where you change like you start really hot and you lower it, or do you do it at a consistent heat and then do the blend afterwards?
That's a really good question, because so many people will do roasting differently. If you were to ask artisan coffee roasters, they would give you a much different answer than an artisan chocolate roaster. In the coffee world, there are reasons to have roasting profiles where you have a really hot temperature to do something and then lower the temperature to do something else in the chemical reactions in the coffee. In chocolate, my approach has always been a very low temperature and very long roast, because I want the bean, which is fairly thick compared to coffee, I want the bean to have a uniform flavor throughout. So whether I have really, really big beans or really small beans in the same batch, I want them all roasted about the same. I don't want a really hot roast that's going to over roast the outside of the bean and then have the inside be under roasted. I want a uniform flavor throughout the whole bean. So for me, it's a slow, constant temperature roast. Now you'll find other chocolate makers who will say, oh no, we do a really hot crack. So we get, and there's reasons to do a hot initial hot burst to crack the shell away quickly and then do some other things later. But that's not my approach.
Okay, we've got about a minute left and we have a couple more questions. Alice Motton is asking how the weather has impacted the growers, and also have you worked with Brazilian beans?
Weather impacts very, very greatly. A rainy season means that they don't have the ability to effectively dry the beans, ferment the beans at a higher temperature that year and dry them, so it's going to affect the flavor. Typically, a really, really rainy season gives you a bean that is a little bit under fermented, and sometimes that means more tannins. So that's definitely a trend that we've seen.
And probably the worst affected this year has been the people from Marignan, where their village actually got wiped out this year. So we're going on probably almost close to 2 years not being able to get our Marignon beans from the Pearson family. So it's pretty sad.
Yep. Yep.
There was actually a bad flood and they were collecting money on GoFundMe for some of the families. People were killed. It was just really awful.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
lost some children, and some of the children were and people were just swept out of the village because of the flash flooding.
Yeah, really sad. I'm sorry, Alice, what was the second question?
Oh,
Have you worked with Brazilian beans?
Brazilian beans? No, I use Brazilian sugar and I've used Brazilian cocoa butter, but I haven't used Brazilian beans yet. I haven't found any that have really just hit me as being, wow, I have to do this.
All right. Well, this has been great. I don't know, can everybody see the poll here? Looks like Chuao is like a big favorite, but all of them have their fans, which is true for anything. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that.
Can I ask one inconsequential question?
Sure.
When you're not eating your chocolate, who are your favorite chocolate makers? Or your favorite chocolate?
So it's
Soma
Chocolate in Toronto. So David is a lovely fellow. I've been up to Toronto Cynthia. I've been up there a few times visiting their factory, and they're so hospitable and lovely folks. Brian and Dahlia at Fruition in Shamokin, New York. We're going to be out there in November visiting them. And they're just lovely people, and I make incredible chocolate. So probably those are our two. Soma and Fruition are the two that, because they do things I don't. I'm strictly a dark chocolate, 100% chocolate focus, and they do confections and a lovely line of milk chocolates. And so I love eating milk chocolate. I just don't make it. We do an allergen-free thing, so nut-free, dairy-free, soy-free, gluten-free. It's kind of one of our things. Eventually, I'd love to do a milk chocolate once we have the ability to separate that completely for the allergen reasons. But I love a good milk chocolate, and I think Fruition makes one of the best. So those are the two that I use when I'm not eating my own.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much, Rob and Amy. I mean, like I said, it's so wonderful having you right up the road, having you as neighbors, I guess you could say, distant neighbors, but neighbors nonetheless. It's really wonderful to be able to bring you to our community. As you know, we have a very geeky chocolate community that really, really loves. That's one of the things I really love about this, is having so many people who are so engaged and interested, not just, about the chocolate, about the environment, about everything. And so thank you, all of you as well, for being here and for asking such great questions and for being so engaged. And I just want to let you know, I put it in the chat, but our next event is going to be with Latitude Craft Chocolate in Uganda. So Jeff Steinberg, the founder, will be joining us from Uganda live. That's on October 23rd. And the one I have not yet posted is November 6th. We're going to also be doing something live with 57 Chocolates who are in Ghana. I have to say that carefully, Uganda and Ghana. I already had somebody get confused, and I thought, oh, I speak fast, so I got to slow down. But we will be doing something with them on November 6th, and I'm working on a couple of more events before the holidays. So please check out the website. The website is, I redid it, so the front page, you can find all the events, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. But again, thank you so much, Rob and Amy. This is really exciting. It's fun to taste your new bars, and congratulations on the awards. And thanks again.
Yeah, Lauren, can I make one last
Please.
statement? Yeah, let me just do one shameless commercial plug for Fresco. If you're not on our mailing list, in addition to Chocolopolis, please sign up. In the place of the Northwest Chocolate Festival, we're doing a little thing where we're going to have sample beans of pretty much all of our chocolates. We're going to send those out and do an online event like this, sort of a taste everything kind of an event. We'll probably do that sometime in late October. Haven't sent out the email yet, but if you're interested, make sure you're on our mailing list, and we will send you a notice. And if you want to sign up, then it'll be all fun and games with chocolate.
And Rob and Amy, if you want to let me know when you've got that figured out, I can put it in our newsletter as well.
Okay.
Awesome. We'll do. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. You started it off well.
Yes.
And yes, visit frescochocolate.com, right?
Yep.
and chocolopolis.com for all our wonderful upcoming events. And we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.